Jayom Vishnupad Paramhansa Paribrajakacharya Asto Tarasata Shri Shrimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikoho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigor Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shyamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Today we're continuing the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, written by His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami. We're on volume 3. We started this reading in 2022. We're taking our time to really relish all of the beautiful pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, how he established Krishna consciousness all over the world. We're still on the first chapter. The first chapter is very long. It's entitled, Swami Invites the Hippies. So this is when Srila Prabhupada was in San Francisco, and it's 50 pages long because he really made a very strong foundation there in San Francisco. And he said that most of his leaders came from that group, the hippies. So Prabhupada, we'll be reading now today also how more of his leading disciples joined him there at San Francisco, just near Haight-Ashbury. So we're about 2/3 through the chapter, and we're introducing another book today. That's A Place of Sandalwood and Roses, written by Govindadasi, because this is also when Govindadasi joined Srila Prabhupada. So we're not taking the pastimes here, so you can read this book yourself, but we've taken some of the pictures of Srila Prabhupada. This picture itself was painted by Govindadasi about a dream that she had. And before she had this dream, we'll read now, Janaki had a very similar dream. So Janaki's going to tell her dream to Srila Prabhupada now. Janaki. One time I told him, Swamiji, I had the most exciting dream. We were all on a planet of our very own, and everybody from Earth had come there. They had all become pure devotees, and they were all chanting. You were sitting on a very special chair high off the ground, and the whole earth was clapping and chanting Hare Krishna. Swamiji smiled and said, oh, that's such a lovely dream. So although this was not the painting for Janaki's dream, it was for Govindadasi's dream, it very much describes that dream. And you'll see right here, Govindadasi put herself in that painting, along with all different types of religious followers and flags of the whole world chanting Hare Krishna. So that was Janaki speaking. Now Satsvarup Maharaj is introducing Govindadasi. Her name was Bonnie McDonald. Bonnie McDonald, age 19, and her boyfriend, and her boyfriend, Gary McElroy, 20, had both come to San Francisco from Austin. Austin is a place where we have a temple in Texas. It's the south of America, where they had been living together as students at the University of Texas. Bonnie was a slight, fair blonde with a sweet southern drawl. So southern drawl, just like here in India, we have so many, the major language is Hindi, but there's Rajasthani Hindi, there's Bihari Hindi, there's MP Hindi, there's Delhi Hindi. So it's the same in America. Mostly everyone speaks English, but depending upon where you live in America, they have different dialects of English. So in Texas, they speak with it's called a drawl. They speak in a particular way. She was born and raised in Southeast Texas in a Baptist family. Baptist means they're followers of Jesus Christ. They believe in, they take sacred bathing to commence their Christian life. In high school, she had become agnostic. That means it's not the same as atheist. Atheist means they say there is no God. Agnostics just, they're at the 0 point. Whether there is God or isn't God, it doesn't matter to them. But later, while traveling in Europe and studying the religious art there and the architecture of the great cathedrals, she had concluded that these great artists couldn't have been completely wrong. So just as we have our Tirtha Yatras here in India, and people like to go from one beautiful temple to the other, they'll come here to Vrindavan, they'll visit the Saptalayas, they'll visit Barsana, Govardhan, all the different main temples, or they'll go to the Char Dham, so many different yatras people take within India. So in Europe, where Christianity is the primary dharma, there are many beautiful churches called cathedrals. And people take their yatras to visit the different cathedrals there. And we, just as in our temple, we have beautiful artwork. In many of the temples, there's artwork. If you go to Barsana, they have so many different beautiful paintings. If you go to Krishna's Janmastan, all over they have beautiful paintings. So within these cathedrals also, they have paintings of the depictions of God and his devotees from the Bible. So Bonnie, having grown up in a Christian family, she took a year or some time off to go on this yatra to visit all the holy places in Europe where these cathedrals were. And she saw the artwork, and she, being an artist, it really touched her heart that she considered herself to be agnostic, that's neither believing God or not believing God. But after seeing the cathedrals and the works of art, she felt that these great artists couldn't have been completely wrong about their being God. So particularly, Leonardo da Vinci, he was a very great artist. He depicted the first, just like we have the different 12 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they have different creation and then secondary creation like that going through the different cantos. So the Bible also has different books. And the first book is called Genesis, which means creation. And in that book, there are 5 major books in the Old Bible, and then there's the New Bible. So in the Old Bible, it describes how God created the world, and in this picture, how God created the first man named Adam, and how he puts life into Adam by his touch. So Bonnie, seeing all of these beautiful paintings, depictions of God, of course God here isn't, because he's the Adi Purush in the Bible, he's considered to look like an old man. So, but we know that he's Navayovana. So this touched her heart. So she had a little bit of, you can call it a religious epiphany, some spiritual realization that these artists, they can't be completely wrong. There must be some basis to their artwork and their belief in God. Gary, that was Bonnie's boyfriend, the son of a U.S. Air Force officer, had been raised in Germany, Okinawa, and other places around the world before his family had settled in Texas. So just like here, they're called military brats. Wherever the father, the officer in the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, wherever they're posted, the children, they go to military schools and they go from place to place. So the same thing in any military family, same in America. They get posted sometimes in other countries, Germany, Okinawa, that's in Japan. So that's how Gary grew up. Wherever his father was posted as an Air Force officer, he had to go with his father and the whole family. Till finally, they settled in Texas, and then he went to University of Texas, just like Bonnie did. His dark hair and bushy brows gave him a scowling look, except when he smiled. He was one of the first students at the University of Texas to wear long hair and experiment with psychedelic drugs. While taking LSD together, he and Bonnie had become obsessed with the idea of going on a spiritual search. And without notifying their parents or school, they had driven to the West Coast in search of someone who could teach us about spiritual life. So that's the mantra of the hippies. Turn on, that means take drugs. Tune in, have a mystical experience, and drop out. So they didn't even tell their parents, they didn't even tell the school. They just left and got in a car and drove to Texas. It takes about 1.5 days to drive from Texas to Haight-Ashbury to San Francisco. It's not a far ride, but no one even knew where they went. This is a picture of Bonnie in her search. These pictures of obviously are coming from this book. So they had spent a few frustrating months searching through spiritual books and amongst spiritual groups in Haight-Ashbury. They had become vegetarians. Gary had started teaching himself to play electric guitar, while Bonnie had gone to Golden Gate Park every day to perform a self-styled Hatha Yoga meditation. But gradually they had become disillusioned and had felt themselves becoming degraded from drugs, because although they were looking for some spiritual enlightenment, they were following the hippie lifestyle of still taking intoxication. And this was degrading them. It was actually taking them away from spiritual life. And they gradually realized that. When the disciple is ready, the guru will appear, they had read. And they had waited eagerly for the day when their guru would come. Although Bonnie had spent most of her time in the parks of San Francisco, one day she had been looking through a table full of magazines in a Haight-Ashbury head shop. We heard about what head shops are last week. That's where they get all of their hippie paraphernalia. So they had a book table there with all kinds of occult books. When she found a copy of Back to Godhead, the mimeograph journal produced by Srila Prabhupada's disciples in New York. So we remember that Srila Prabhupada purchased the first 2 mimeograph machines, and the devotees, whoever was staying in the 26 Second Avenue, they would print out the pages, they would collate the pages, then they would staple them together, and then particularly Gargamuni, he would go out and distribute these magazines, sell them for, I think they were 25 cents at this time when they were first printed. 25 cents nowadays, well, in those days, it was very little. So Now when the devotees came to San Francisco, they had Back to Godheads brought there too. And the devotees also started distributing these and putting them in the head shops so the hippies could get them. She had been particularly attracted to Hayagriva's article about Swamiji. The descriptions of Swamiji's smile... Turn that off. Usko band karo. The descriptions of Swamiji's smile, his bright eyes, his pointy-toed shoes, and the things he said had given her a feeling that this might be the guru she had been looking for. And when she had learned that this same Swamiji had opened an ashram in Haight-Ashbury, she had immediately started searching through the neighborhood until she had found the temple on Frederick Street. So they were going by the assumption that when a person is ready, the guru will appear in their life. That's also described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that when Krishna, who's in our heart, sees that we're serious about spiritual life, he will send a guru, and the guru will then plant the Bhakti Lata Bij in the heart. So she was very serious. She was trying to practice Hatha Yoga, sitting in the beautiful parks, and she found the Back to Godhead magazine, and now she found the temple. Before Bonnie and Gary met Swamiji, they had both been troubled. Gary was in anxiety about the threat of being drafted into the army. And both of them were disillusioned because they had not found the truth they had come to San Francisco to find. So on meeting Srila Prabhupada in his room, they began to explain their situation. So Prabhupada, you see, he has the same setup, his trunk with all of his manuscripts inside of his trunk. He would sleep right there. And they came to the temple, and the devotees said, they asked if they could meet Swamiji. They said, yeah, just go upstairs, he's in his room. They went up to meet him there. So this draft, this is the big fear of the American young boys. Because anyone over 18, if they weren't enrolled in college, they would be forcibly pushed into the army and would be sent to Vietnam, which was a terrible place where 50,000 young men from America died uselessly. They also lost the war. Not only did they die uselessly, but it was for no purpose whatsoever, their deaths. So he, now having left the university, if the draft board caught him, they would grab him and put him into the army and send him to Vietnam. So he was very worried, and the draft board was looking for these youngsters, especially where all the hippies were, because they weren't in school. They were just taking drugs and being antisocial. So they wanted to draft these young boys. I happened to read in the book what finally happened with that. Later, he got a letter that he had to come to the draft board, and Prabhupada said, don't worry, Krishna will protect you. And by that time, all the devotees, we had these Lord Jagannath, not pendants, they were actually little deities that we would wear on our, as a necklace to protect us. So what he did was he put his Lord Jagannath around his neck, and he took his big red beads, and when he went for the interview, he had Lord Jagannath, and he had Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So the army officers are looking at this crazy boy, and can't figure out who this is and what he's chanting and what he's doing. So they gave him a psychologically unfit, dismissed from the army. But if needed, they would call him. It's like, we'll call you, don't call us. So Krishna did save him. So now they've met Prabhupada, they come to his room, and they start explaining to Prabhupada their problems in their life. This is called, when you share all your problems, and this spiritual master has to listen to all these problems. Bonnie. He was sitting in a rocking chair in his little apartment, and he looked at us like we were crazy, because we were, and said, "You come to my classes. Simply come to my classes every morning and every evening, and everything will be all right." That's the medicine. Just same medicine that we take. We have our morning dose and our evening dose, right? That sounded to us like an unbelievable panacea. Panacea means medicine, cure. But because we were so bewildered, we agreed to it. I told him I had traveled all over Europe, and he said, "Oh, you have traveled so much?" And I said to him, "Yes, I have traveled so much. I've done so many things, but none of it ever made me happy." He was pleased with that statement. He said, "Yes, that is the problem." We began going to his morning lectures. For us, it was a long distance to get there at 7 in the morning, but we did it every morning with the conviction that this was what he had said to do, and we were going to do it. Then one day he asked us, "What do you do?" When we said that formerly we had been art students at college, he told us to paint pictures of Krishna. Shortly after that, we asked to be initiated. So here in this book, it's just amazing, all of the beautiful, Srila Prabhupada had them paint the Back to Godhead covers. Beautiful Back to Godhead covers. See? One after another. They also painted all of the pictures in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada had them make a special book called Prahlad. It was the story of, here's more and so many beautiful paintings they made to help Srila Prabhupada. It was the story of Prahlad and Lord Nrsingadev. A very beautiful book that was the first children's book that Prabhupada had the devotees make. See, more and more, this is from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So they used their talent of painting for Srila Prabhupada. Now, Satsru Maharaj has introduced Gary and Bonnie. They will later go on to open a temple in Hawaii, make many, many devotees there, and continue serving Prabhupada throughout their life. Now, Satsru Maharaj is going back to Joan and Roger. That's Jamuna and Gurudas. Joan and Roger were soon initiated, receiving the names Jamuna and Gurudas. And the very next day they were married. At their wedding ceremony, Swamiji presided, wearing a bulky garland of leaves and rhododendron flowers. He sat on a cushion on the temple floor. You can see Prabhupada there in the corner. Surrounded by his followers and paraphernalia for the sacrificial fire. Before him was the small mound of earth where he would later build the fire. He explained the meaning of Krishna-conscious marriage and how a husband and wife should assist one another and serve Krishna, keeping him in the center. Now, fortunately, Guru Das and Jamuna knew each other before they got married. Many of the devotees met their husbands and wives at the time when they were sitting down and getting married. Because Srila Prabhupada had to make many temples. So when it was time that a boy wanted to get married and a girl wanted to get married, they would bring them together, get them married, and send them out to open temples. And this happened quite frequently. Swamiji had commented that he did not like the Western women's dress, and at his request, Jamuna was dressed in a sari. If you want to know more details about this, you can read Jamuna's 2-volume biography. Although Swamiji had called for ghee as one of the sacrificial ingredients, the devotees, thinking ghee too costly, had substituted melted margarine. Margarine is like dalda. He had called for firewood also, and the devotees had supplied him the bits of a broken orange crate. They took a wooden box and just broke it up into pieces. Now, with Jamuna and Guru Das seated before him on the opposite side of the mound of earth, he picked up a small piece of the splintered orange crate, dipped it into what was supposed to be ghee, and held it in the candle flame to begin the fire. The splinter flamed, sputtered, and went out. He picked up another splinter and moistened it in the melted margarine, but when he touched it to the flame, it made the same svit-svit sound and sputtered out. After trying unsuccessfully 4 or 5 times, Swamiji looked up and said, "This marriage will have a very slow start." Jamuna began to cry. So, yes, they were married, and they did incredible amounts of service for Srila Prabhupada, helping to open the San Francisco temple, and then going to Montreal, where Jamuna learned how to sing from Srila Prabhupada, and then going together to London and opening up the London temple, then making records, the chanting of Hare Krishna, the Govinda prayers that we sing, a whole record album that was produced by the Beatles that became the top seller all around the world. Then Prabhupada had them come here to India. They traveled all over with Prabhupada for 1 year. And then Prabhupada had Guru Das specifically and Jamuna come here to open our Vrindavan temple. It was very, very austere here in those days. So by 1974, before the temple was even opened, Jamuna and Guru Das left here. And Jamuna went to, they went to Europe and then finally to America. And Jamuna left Guru Das. You can read all of this in her book. And Guru Das was very brokenhearted. And Prabhupada explained to him that, well, your wife has taken sannyas, so you also take sannyas now. So in 1976, I put a picture here. This is when Srila Prabhupada awarded sannyas to Guru Das. And then Guru Das is still to this day preaching. After sannyas, he went to Eastern Europe. He was preaching in Poland. And then he was traveling all over the world preaching. And now he's still preaching. He wrote a beautiful book of his memories of Srila Prabhupada called By His Example. And whenever possible, we have him come here to enlighten the devotees. He's invited to so many temples around the world, in Russia and England, to inspire the devotees with his pastimes with Srila Prabhupada. So both of their lives fully spent in Srila Prabhupada's service. Bonnie and Gary were initiated just 2 weeks after they had met Swamiji. Bonnie's initiated name was Govindadasi, and Gary's was Gaurasundar. Although still dressed in blue jeans, even at their initiation, blue jeans means jeans, and not professing to know much of what was going on, they had confidence in Swamiji. They knew that their minds were still hazy from drugs, but they took their initiation seriously and became strict followers. Gaurasundar threw out whatever marijuana he had. That means even at the time of initiation, they still had some intoxication, but after the initiation, they threw it out. I remember one devotee who joined at this time. She told me that she had a whole stash of, I forget, I don't know what it's called, hashish. It's the flowers of marijuana. Anyway, it's an intoxication. So when she decided to become a devotee, she took that, which was worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and flushed it down the toilet. And he and Govindadasi began eating only food they had offered to Lord Krishna. 2 weeks after their initiation, Swamiji conducted their marriage ceremony. On the evening of the wedding, Govindadasi's father came from Texas, even though he objected to Krishna consciousness as radically un-American. Walking up to Srila Prabhupada's seat in the temple, Govindadasi's father asked, "Why do you have to change my daughter's name? Why does she have to have an Indian name?" Prabhupada looked at him and then with a mischievous gleam looked at Mr. Patel, an Indian guest standing nearby with his family. "You don't like Indians?" he asked. Everyone who heard Swamiji laughed, except for Govindadasi's father, who replied, "Well, yeah, they're all right. But why does Bonnie have to have a different name?" Now Prabhupada replies, "Because she asked me to give her one," Srila Prabhupada replied. "If you love her, you will like what she likes. Your daughter is happy. Why do you object?" The discussion ended there, and Govindadasi's father remained civil. Later, he enjoyed taking prasadam with his daughter and son-in-law. So Srila Prabhupada had a mathematical formula. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Correct? Okay. So this was the answer that he gave to another father, Urmila's father, who had objected to her becoming a devotee. He said, "Your daughter loves Krishna." No, you love your daughter. The father loves the daughter. The daughter loves Krishna. Therefore, the father also loves Krishna. And when my parents were concerned, Prabhupada, he praised them. He said, "You are very nice, so you're," meaning me, "so your parents must be very nice also." He said, "Mangoes come from the mango tree." So then they felt that because I had become a devotee, therefore the parents, they had helped to produce the devotee. So they felt that it was worthwhile then. Govindadasi. Gaurasundar and I set about reading the 3 volumes of Swamiji's Srimad Bhagavatam. And at the same time, Swamiji had told me to paint a large canvas of Radha and Krishna and a cow. So every day, for the whole day, I would paint, and Gaur-Sundar would read out loud from the Srimad Bhagavatam, one volume after another. We did this continuously for 2 months. That means it took 2 months to paint this picture. During this time, Swamiji also asked me to do a portrait of him standing before a background painting of Lord Chaitanya dancing. Swamiji wanted it so that Lord Chaitanya's foot would be touching his head. I tried. It was a pretty horrible painting, and yet he was happy with it. So what Prabhupada wanted was, within the painting, he wanted the painting of the Panchatattva, and sitting below the painting was a painting of Prabhupada with Lord Chaitanya's foot right at Prabhupada's head. So this is what the painting looked like. Prabhupada's thoughtful followers felt that some of the candidates for initiation did not intend to fulfill the exclusive, lifelong commitment a disciple owes to his guru. Swamiji, they would say, some of these people come only for their initiation. We have never seen them before, and we never see them again. Srila Prabhupada replied that that was the risk he had to take. One day in a lecture in the temple, he explained that although the reactions for a disciple's past sins are removed at initiation, the spiritual master remains responsible until the disciple is delivered from the material world. Therefore, he said, Lord Chaitanya warned that a guru should not accept many disciples. So, many people were coming to the temple for kirtans, to hear the lectures. And they understood that initiation was a very important thing. And they wanted to have that connection, that spiritual connection of having a guru. So they would take initiation, but they didn't understand the philosophy well enough to become serious devotees. So many of these early disciples, they were very sincere. They wanted to become devotees, but due to past habits, due to lifestyle, they didn't remain devotees for long. But they still have the connection. Srila Prabhupada still initiated them, and Srila Prabhupada still feels a responsibility for them. And if you read in Jamuna's book, there's a description of one devotee who Srila Prabhupada had initiated in New York. If you remember, it was Rabindra Swarup, the first Rabindra Swarup. Now, he followed Prabhupada to San Francisco, but he fell down there. And one day while Prabhupada was giving his lecture, Rabindra Swarup comes into the temple, crying, putting his head at Prabhupada's feet, and begging forgiveness because he can't follow the principles. And Prabhupada was patting his head, that's all right, you just try. Stay in the association of devotees. So, we have to remember this was a completely foreign culture, and the very things that the Americans, their lifestyle was meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication. So it was difficult for some of them to give that up as a lifetime commitment, and therefore some of them fell away. But Srila Prabhupada never gave them up. Even when Prabhupada was sick here in 1974, no one could understand how Prabhupada had become so ill. And then he explained that it's because my disciples are not chanting their 16 rounds. So then it was spread all over to, letter. We didn't have computers and all that stuff. Letters had to be sent to all the temples that everyone has to very carefully chant their 16 rounds because this is affecting Srila Prabhupada's health. So when we take initiation, we have to understand this is a contract that the Guru, he promises to take you back to Krishna. But our responsibility is the vows that we take. We have to chant 16 rounds minimum every day and follow the 4 regulative principles for the rest of our life. The end. It's over. No, none of the principles should be broken, and then we'll be able to go back to Godhead. That's the contract. One night in the temple, during the question and answer session, a big bearded fellow raised his hand and asked Prabhupada, "Can I become initiated?" The brash public request annoyed some of Prabhupada's followers, but Prabhupada was serene. "Yes," he replied, "but first you must answer 2 questions. Who is Krishna?" The boy thought for a moment and said, "Krishna is God." "Yes," Prabhupada replied. "And who are you?" Again the boy thought for a few moments and then replied, "I am the servant of God." "Very good," Prabhupada said. "Yes, you can be initiated tomorrow." So the rules of time waiting, how much time you had to wait for initiation, that wasn't started until 1970. I know that because Prabhupada was in Japan at the time, and they had me write a letter to Prabhupada asking for initiation. I had been in the temple for 1 month. But they needed devotees. There were only 4 devotees in the temple. So I wrote the letter, and then a letter came, again, to all the temples, that now no one can take initiation unless they've been living in the temple and following the principles for 6 months. And I went into panic. I thought, oh, I just wrote the letter, but Srila Prabhupada, he initiated me. He wrote the letter back and initiated me. So the first restriction was that you had to wait 6 months before you took initiation. And then after that, you had to wait either another 6 months or another year before you would be allowed to take your Brahmin Diksha, because we had to test and make sure that someone was actually following the 4 regulative principles. And then, in 1972, Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to the temple president in New York. And he said, "We have enough disciples now. Now we have to boil the milk." That means that whoever was then Prabhupada's disciples, he had a few thousand disciples by that time, he wanted to make them stronger devotees. Not that we make more and more and more devotees, but they're not following. But those who are disciples, they had to become very strict and very devoted in their vows and in their service. So then Prabhupada was reducing the number of disciples that he was accepting from then onwards. And he also stopped giving marriages because he saw that many of the marriages were not lasting. So he refused to perform any more marriages after some time. And there was also, as the movement expanded, Srila Prabhupada, because he was always traveling, he couldn't meet all of the disciples, the devotees who wanted to become disciples. So he would assign the temple presidents to recommend the devotees for initiation. If the temple president gave their recommendation, then Srila Prabhupada would accept them as disciples. And many of the disciples from that time onwards, they didn't even get to meet Prabhupada. They would be initiated by letter. And then within the temple president would then perform the fire sacrifice, and they would get their beads and their names. So as things expanded, Srila Prabhupada couldn't take personal care of all of his disciples as he was doing now in the early days. Srila Prabhupada knew that it would be difficult for his Western disciples to stick to Krishna consciousness and attain the goal of pure devotional service. All their lives they had had the worst of training, and despite their nominal Christianity and philosophical searching, most of them knew nothing of the science of God. They did not even know that illicit sex and meat eating were wrong, although when he told them they accepted what he said. And they freely chanted Hare Krishna. So how could he refuse them? So the devotees, you can tell the devotees by the big beads that they wear. This is Gurudas sitting here and Mukunda playing the mridanga. They would go out to the Golden Gate Park and sit down and start having kirtan. And hundreds, just as in Tompkins Square and Washington Square in New York. But here we had thousands of people coming and taking part in the kirtans, coming to the temple. It was much, much bigger audience because that was the center of the counterculture there at Haight-Ashbury. So it attracted many people, but because of that lack of knowledge, this lack of the knowledge of the science of God, and even knowing that illicit sex and meat eating were wrong, it was difficult for some of these young people to take up Krishna consciousness. But once Prabhupada told them it was wrong, they tried to stop their habits. Of course, whether they would be able to persevere in Krishna consciousness despite the ever-present attractions of Maya would be seen in time. Some would fall. That was the human tendency. But some would not. At least those who sincerely followed his instructions to chant Hare Krishna and avoid sinful activities would be successful. And we have the example of these first devotees, such as Mukunda, Gurudas, Jamuna. They never left Srila Prabhupada. They served him from the time they were initiated and carried throughout their whole lives. Many of them are not with us anymore. But those who are still alive, they're still following their vows and serving Srila Prabhupada as best they can. He gave the example that a person could say that today's fresh food, if not properly used, would spoil in a few days. But if it is fresh now, to say that in the future it will be misused and therefore spoil is only a surmise. So what Srila Prabhupada was saying here is that at the time of initiation, when we would take our vows, we want to follow. It's not that, well, maybe in the future you won't follow, so I better not initiate you. No, Srila Prabhupada had faith in the process enough that when a person came and requested initiation and felt that they could sit in front of the fire, sit in front of the Vaishnavas, sit in front of the Guru, and take those vows, then it's not that absolutely they're going to fall down. Fall down is the tendency. But if they remain in the association of devotees and continue to follow the four regulative principles, they will be able to make advancement and continue on the path back to Godhead. So Prabhupada was taking that risk. It was a great risk, and therefore sometimes he would get sick. At an early age, 81, he left us, but he left us physically in Vapu form. We have, here in Vrindavan, we're the most fortunate because we have Srila Prabhupada's presence everywhere we look. In the temple, on the altar, in the Samadhi, at the Radha Damodar temple, everywhere is Srila Prabhupada. In his house. So we're the most fortunate of all the devotees in the whole world because Prabhupada is everywhere for us. It's very hard to forget Srila Prabhupada here because he's so much present with us still. Yes, in the future anyone could fall down, but Prabhupada took it as his responsibility to engage his disciples now. And he was giving them the methods which, if followed, would protect them from ever falling down. So this is a picture from Shyam Sundar's book, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. Thousands joined us for kirtans on Hippie Hill. Hippie Hill was a part of Golden Gate Park. Aside from Vedic standards, even by the standard of Swamiji's New York disciples, the devotees in San Francisco were not very strict. Some continued going to the donut shop. Does everyone know what donuts are? It's a pastry, and it has a hole in the center. We offer them to Radha and Krishna here. Eating food without offering it to Krishna, and eating forbidden things like chocolate and commercial ice cream. So raise your hands if you still eat ice cream. Yes, we all do, because they even serve it at the temple here sometimes. But here you don't have to. I mean, here we assume that it's pure vegetarian. In America, you never know what they put in things. Even in the ketchup, because there's so much pig slaughter and cow slaughter. So when an animal is slaughtered, there's so much blood. So they take the blood. They have all different ways to use the byproducts of slaughter in the West. They take all the blood, they put that into the ketchup. And they make candies. There's something called gelatin. Everyone knows what gelatin is. They make gelatin candies. Now that's made from the hooves and the horns of the animals. So what to do with all these dead bodies and the products of slaughter? They figure out ways to slip it into the food, because otherwise what do they do with it all? So you have to be, that's why Srila Prabhupada would not even allow us, you know, the, what's it called, milkmaid here in the cans? We're not allowed to use milkmaid. We're not supposed to. They still do, but we're not supposed to. Nothing cooked by non-devotees is allowed to be offered or eaten by the devotees. So Prabhupada, he had very strict rules for us. But then, for instance, in America, they have milk. Milk is milk. You don't have, it's the miracle food. So what they do in America is they take fish oil, because fish oil has 2 vitamins in it, vitamin A and vitamin D. And they enrich the milk with fish oil. So you couldn't get milk in America without fish oil mixed into it. So they explained it to Srila Prabhupada, that Prabhupada, all of our milk in America, by law, they put this fish oil in to enrich the vitamins. So what can we do? How do we offer it to Krishna? And Prabhupada explained that, well, Krishna likes milk, we have to offer the milk. So you offer the milk anyway. There were just contaminations that we couldn't avoid. Some even indulge in, chocolate. Now, what's wrong with chocolate? This was a big GBC debate. Resolution made. Devotees are not supposed to eat chocolate. Chocolate has, maybe you've all heard of the intoxicant called cocaine. So that's made from cocoa beans, cocoa. So there's an intoxicant inside chocolate. And that's why some children get addicted to chocolate. They have to have chocolate. You'll see they'll throw tantrums if their parents won't let them have chocolate. It's because chocolate is addictive. It's an intoxicant. So therefore, we're not supposed to eat chocolate. Commercial ice cream, that sometimes has gelatin. It sometimes has eggs. We don't know what even in Nirulas, we asked them in Delhi. They said, well, everyone knows that you put eggs in ice cream. So you can't be safe with anything bought outside. Nowadays, even in India. If you want to eat ice cream, you can make your own ice cream and offer it to Krishna. That's the proper way to do things. And we have something called carob. Carob is a substitute for chocolate. It's a long bean, like tamarind, but it's longer than tamarind. And when ground up, all of the things that we offer to the deities that are dark brown, that's not made with chocolate. That's made with carob. Except in our bakery, they still... But for the deities, we only offer carob, which is a replacement for chocolate. Some even indulged in after kirtan cigarette breaks right outside the temple door. Some got initiated without knowing precisely what they had agreed to practice. Kirtanananda. Because Kirtanananda also followed Prabhupada to Los Angeles for the Avalon Ballroom dance, and then he stayed there for some time. The mood in San Francisco, this is Kirtanananda here, was a lot more relaxed. The devotees liked to go to the corner and have their coffee and donuts. But Prahlad loved the way so many people were coming, and he loved the program at the Avalon Ballroom. But there were two sides. Those who strictly followed the rules and regulations and emphasized purity, and then those who were not so concerned about strictness, but who wanted to spread Krishna consciousness as widely as possible. Swamiji was so great that he embraced both groups. That's still going on today. Some people are less strict, some people are very strict. Michael Wright, 21, had recently gotten out of the Marine Corps. That's the Marine Corps are the strictest and strongest of all the military in America. And Nancy Grindle, 18, that's Nancy Grindle in the center, was fresh out of high school. They had met in college in Los Angeles. Feeling frustrated and in need of something tangible with which to dedicate their lives, they had come to San Francisco to join the hippies. But they soon realized that they and the Haight-Ashbury hippies, whom they found dirty, aimless, unproductive, and lost in their search for identity, had little in common. One was out of the military, the other was a college student, and they just saw the hippies as lost, although they had high hopes when they left their home and came to Haight-Ashbury. So Nancy took a job as a secretary for the telephone company, and Michael found work as a lineman for the electric company. Then they heard about the Swami in Haight-Ashbury and decided to visit the temple. It was an evening kirtan, and the irrepressible hippies were twirling, twisting, and wiggling. Michael and Nancy took a seat on the floor off to one side, impressed more by the presence of the Swami than by the kirtan. After the kirtan, Prabhupada lectured, but they found his accent heavy. They wanted to understand. They had an innate feeling that he was saying something valuable, and yet the secret seemed locked behind a thick accent and within a book written in another language. They decided to come back in the morning and try again. So we see here Nancy. Nancy will hear next week. She became Nandarani. Her husband became Dayananda. They did so much service for Srila Prabhupada. They went to Los Angeles, opened the temple there, and then they were sent to Dallas, Texas. I'll just give you a little here. Dallas, Texas, where Dayananda was the principal of the Gurukula. They had 3 children, wonderful service. Then they came here to India. Dayananda became Prabhupada's secretary. Nandarani became Prabhupada's cook. So starting out like this, from there, they became first-class devotees. There's Dayananda, very tall and skinny, see? And there's Nandarani with her first little daughter there. I think that's Chandramukhi. So from hippies, they became happies. And they did so much service for Srila Prabhupada, and we'll hear about them next week. Hare Krishna. Jai.